Showdown on Capitol Hill as both sides trade verbal blows as Congress works to raise the debt ceiling. On top of that, President Biden traveled to Michigan to drum up support for his twin economic packages. Lawmakers divided on next steps to rein in big tech after the Facebook whistleblower called on Congress to act. And Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Schiller, the Marine Corps officer put in pretrial detention for criticizing the military leadership, has been freed, but he could still face charges and trial. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Showdown on Capitol Hill as Congress debates raising the debt ceiling. That's before the government runs out of money. Democrats are giving the debt limit vote another run this afternoon. It would allow them to start debating on a bill that would suspend the debt limit until the end of next year.
We could prevent a catastrophic default with a simple majority vote.
On Tuesday, President Biden suggested they could use the nuclear option to drop the rule that requires 60 votes to pass most legislation. He told reporters, "I think that's a real possibility." Republicans could also just not use the filibuster to block the vote, but the minority leader says that's unlikely.
That would require getting consent from every single Republican to lower the threshold to 51.
Do you not have the power to do that?
I can't imagine that would happen.
Instead, Republicans want Democrats to use the reconciliation process, which wouldn't require any Republican support. But Democrats argue that would take too long, with less than 2 weeks until the deadline.
There's not much time left to do it by reconciliation.
Without a quick resolution, some government services might be suspended. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said the U.S. risks widespread economic catastrophe if Congress fails to raise or suspend the U.S. debt limit. So what does that mean? If the Treasury runs out of money, the government could default and be unable to pay certain benefits. According to the Bipartisan Policy Center, the Treasury could be forced to cut payments by more than 40%, including areas like Social Security, military pay, housing programs, unemployment, and so on. And to clarify, the debt ceiling is not about new spending. That's packages like the $3.5 trillion spending proposal that Democrats are trying to push through. Instead, the debt ceiling is about spending Congress has already authorized, such as paying out Social Security. It's a limit on federal borrowing. Raising it allows the government to avoid going into default. It was introduced during World War I so that Congress would not have to approve every bond issuance by the Treasury Department as it had done previously. The debt ceiling has been suspended dozens of times over the years, including 3 times during the Trump administration. Democrats want to raise how much money the federal government can borrow in order to keep paying government workers, but Republicans are against raising the debt limit. Democrats have also emphasized that the nation's first ever default could arise from a failure to raise the debt ceiling. Republicans, meanwhile, argue that the crisis is of Democrats' own making. Top Senate leaders trading verbal blows on Capitol Hill.
If Republicans would just get out of the damn way, we could get this all done. We're not asking them to vote to raise the debt ceiling. That's what they asked us. That's what McConnell asked for 3 months. Let Democrats vote for it. If they got out of the way, that's just what could happen.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, meanwhile, pushed back, saying the Democrats created their own mess.
They've had plenty of time to execute the debt ceiling increase and have chosen not to do it.
Now, as to whether it'll end up with the Treasury defaulting, Moody's Investor Service said on Tuesday it expects Washington will raise the debt limit. And Senator Joe Manchin also weighed in.
We are not going to default as a country. We will not default. That's the responsibility we have as senators, as congressmen, as 535 of us responsible to protect this great country in an equal branch of government. But the bottom line is we have a responsibility to be the adults. Our leadership has the responsibility to lead.
And it's not just the debt ceiling being debated. President Biden in Michigan on Tuesday to drum up support for his 2 economic packages. Both are stalled on Capitol Hill because of sharp decisions within his own party. The main sticking points, size and scope.
These bills are about competitiveness versus complacency. They're about opportunity versus decay. They're about leading the world or continue to let the world pass us by.
The president's team arguing that his Build Back Better plan, which includes a $1 trillion infrastructure package as well as a larger $3.5 trillion bill to expand the social safety net, are essential to the country's economic growth.
He's going to have his sleeves rolled up and he'll be very engaged moving forward.
With so much at stake, some say it's more important than ever for Congress to deliver.
We ought to focus on children, focus on taking care of our seniors, focus on getting this country back on track, and stop looking at these top-line numbers.
Now for some updates. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Schiller, the Marine Corps officer put in pretrial detention for criticizing the military leadership, has been freed. A source familiar with the matter told the Epoch Times that Schiller has submitted a request for resignation of his commission in lieu of a trial. But he could still face charges and a trial in military court. Schiller was initially scheduled for a pretrial confinement initial review hearing on Tuesday, and some military leaders had wanted to do it in secret. Schiller went viral in late August for criticizing senior military leadership on the withdrawal from Afghanistan. His initial video was posted on the same day that 13 U.S. troops and scores of Afghans were killed in an attack outside of the international airport in Kabul. He published another video on September 16th saying that he was calling for accountability of my senior leaders over obvious mistakes that were made. In that video, Schiller also said he was submitting charges against Central Command Commander General Kenneth Frank McKenzie for his role in the, quote, disastrous withdrawal. According to reports, Schiller was thrown in the brig on September 27th. That sparked outrage from members of the public and some lawmakers. 35 of them wrote a letter calling for Schiller's release. And during the Senate Facebook hearing on Tuesday, Frances Haugen called on Congress to act.
Facebook needs to take responsibility.
Let's take a look at how lawmakers are responding. Senator Richard Blumenthal warned that Facebook faces a reckoning akin to other industries like big tobacco. That's when the tobacco industry tried to hide information that cigarettes caused cancer. He is also calling for more exposure.
I'm hoping there are other whistleblowers out there and more documents. We can't count on Mark Zuckerberg to tell us the truth. If he wants to explain these documents, thousands of them, his own research, his own reports that show how they are putting profits ahead of people and endangering children, he should come tell it to our committee and to the American people himself.
Zuckerberg is in the hot seat as lawmakers blasted him for not just failing to show up to the hearing, but for going sailing. Blumenthal saying Mark Zuckerberg ought to be looking at himself in the mirror, adding in yet rather than taking responsibility, showing leadership, Mr. Zuckerberg is going sailing. He went on to say Zuckerberg's new modus operandi is no apologies, no admission, no action, nothing to see here. Zuckerberg defended his company. In a note to employees, he said those recent claims about the social network's effects on society, quote, don't make any sense. That's after former Facebook product manager Frances Haugen testified before Congress on Tuesday. The focus of the hearing was on Facebook's internal research that showed Instagram can have a negative effect on young people. Zuckerberg later released a statement on his personal Facebook page addressing Haugen's testimony and Monday's outage, which brought down Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram for about 6 hours. It reads in part that instead of ignoring that young people use technology, tech companies should build experiences that meet their needs while also keeping them safe. And after the hearing, Facebook issued a statement suggesting it was open to having the government begin to create standard rules for the internet. So how are lawmakers responding? In a surprising show of bipartisanship, both sides of the aisle are demanding federal action against big tech. Both Republicans and Democrats showed support for abandoning or significantly reforming Section 230 protections for the social media platform. Under a 1990s U.S. law, tech companies are not responsible for the content shared by users on their platforms. But that's not all. Senator Blackburn saying that privacy had been a concern for her since she was in the House of Representatives, where she noted that she had put forward federal privacy laws. She went on to say that Facebook may be acting in violation of existing federal law, including the Children's Privacy Protection Act. She said that Congress should look into whether such violations are happening. Blackburn also showed support for Klobuchar's stance on strengthening and using antitrust laws. That suggests antitrust may be used along with new federal privacy legislation and Section 230 reform. But as to what the specific issue are, lawmakers disagree. Senator Ted Cruz said Facebook and other social media platforms had shown a pattern of engaging in political censorship, while Senator Klobuchar said that Facebook found that its algorithms foster polarization, misinformation, and hate, but that the company allowed 99% of violent content to remain unchecked on their platform, including lead up to the January 6th insurrection. And while many have called for Facebook and other social media giants to be broken up amid fears of monopolistic practices, that's not what the whistleblower wants. Haugen said, "I am actually against the breaking up of Facebook," saying such antitrust action would not address the root problems, which she said lie in the artificial intelligence used to power Facebook's powerful algorithm. That's despite both Blackburn and Klobuchar floating the idea. She went on to say Facebook is the internet for lots of the world, especially noting poor regions such as Africa, saying if you go to Africa, the internet is Facebook. And what does Facebook have to say about all that? The company's Director of Policy of Communications, Lena Peach, responded by calling Haugen's credibility into question, saying she was a former product manager at Facebook who worked for the company for less than 2 years, had no direct reports, never attended a decision point meeting with C-level executives, adding, "We don't agree with her characterization of the many issues she testified about. Despite this, we agree on one thing. It is time to begin to create standard rules for the internet." That's a reflection of Zuckerberg's previous statements that expressed he is open to action by the government to regulate his platform. And now for something a little different. A defining masterpiece by renowned Renaissance artist Sandra Botticelli is expected to raise millions when it hits the auction block next year. Art aficionados predict The Man of Sorrows will bring in more than $40 million. It is believed students or followers of Botticelli created the half-length panel painting of the resurrected Christ around 1500. The piece appeared in auction in 1963 and sold for around $13,000. Sotheby's will auction the painting in New York in January 2022. And now, before we end, a thankful owl. Idaho state troopers can add great horned owl to their list of saves. Concerned drivers alerted police that the bird was caught in plastic next to the interstate. The state trooper kept the owl safe from traffic until animal experts arrived, with the two sharing a selfie moment. The owl is doing okay and was released away from the freeway. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.